Okay, so step one, I've got multiple different meshes in this file. Um, and I'm not going to bake them all out. What I'm actually interested in baking is just the skin, just the arm itself. So under my subtools, I'll go to the arm and I'll isolate it. And there is now the arm, which is really creepy when you see fingernails being ripped out like that. But here is now just the arm as it exists. The arm is currently 12 million polys, which is going to destroy Max if I try and bring that in. I don't want to go much lower than this, though. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to my geo, and I'm going to try and get this to around 1,000,000 polys. There's 3. I'll probably get to about 500,000 if I go down. There's 700. I just want to look at how much detail I'm losing if I do this. So that's too much, I think. Okay. So here's where I'm going to bake it out. Now, this arm as well, just so you're aware of this, isn't fully sculpted. There's nothing on the palm or the wrist here. The same is true with the back of the hand. In fact, you can see where I started sculpting the knuckles and I just stopped. And this is because this arm actually contains a wrist guard that obscures that detail. And so you don't actually notice that any of that stuff is missing when she's wearing the wrist guard. Oh, it just occurred to me that that wrist guard by itself would look pretty cool. Anyway, just so you're aware, so that none of that detail is there. However, on the other parts of the mesh here, she's got fingerprints and there's wrinkles and stuff in the hands, and so it should look pretty nice. Now, in order to get this out, I need to ensure she's got UVs, and if I hit Morph UV, I can see she's got UVs, but I can also see that those UVs are kind of stupid. This is her forearm. This is the palm of her hand with a strip of the forearm, and then her 5 fingers are all disembodied. And so my UVs suck. So I'm going to go down to my lowest subdivision level, and I'm going to re-unwrap this thing. So I'll just grab my plugins, and I'll go to UV Master, and I'll just re-unwrap this. And I don't really care much what the UVs look like. I mean, obviously, I want to make sure that they look decent. But this is a little bit better. I can see that it doesn't quite make a lot of sense where it decided to split these fingers up. And that there's kind of like a missing row or two of polygons here. And then you can see where those guys should go there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to morph this back. And only because it's kind of a pain to do this in ZBrush, I'm going to export this. Let's throw it on the desktop for now as arm. And I'm just going to go and clean that up in Max. So this is just going to require a couple of minutes of unwrapping here. Yeah, that's fine. So I'm just going to rename this here because I do have something in my scene called arm already. So I'm going to isolate this and open this up. This should be the same broken UVs as we saw them in ZBrush a moment ago. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and fix this up a little bit so I can see these vertices here, or these polygons here, shouldn't be there. They should be over here. And so I'll just rotate them into the right position, bring him in here, and I'll grab this edge, double click, and I'll snap the red to blue, this edge, red to blue, and this edge, red to blue. And since this looks pretty pathetic, I'll go and adjust it a little bit here. And I'll just grab the tip of these guys. Don't need this. And I'll just do a little bit of a relax on it to try and get it a little bit cleaner. Make sure it stays inside the 0 to 1 box. All right, so that one's clean. This is problematic here as well. So it looks like it kept the entire thumb together and split the index down the middle. However, I think I'm going to just let that go. Now, just because sometimes there's a bug in ZBrush, I want to try to avoid this bug. Every now and then when you bring an OBJ into ZBrush, it renumbers your vertices and all of your UVs rotate on themselves. And so I found a little bit of a trick for that, which is kind of stupid. But what I'm going to do is I've got a box that's an editable mesh, and I'm going to attach the arm to the box. I'll isolate this. I'll then delete the box, and then I'll convert this to an editable poly. And for whatever reason, that fixes the renumeration of the vertices. So we'll just go and export selected over that same arm. And in ZBrush, and I want to make sure that I don't get any errors when I do this here, but I'm going to re-import that arm again. And I want to make sure that there's no change on this thing. I'm going to morph into the UVs and make sure that I'm seeing the updated changes I made in Max, which appears to be the case. So I can morph this back down. And I'm going to go to my geo and back up to subdivision level 6, I think it was, which is 3 million polys, which is now good. Okay. I also want to make sure that nothing weird has happened on the model by importing and exporting, which it does not appear to be. She still looks pretty clean. No artifacting or anything. So I'm going to delete my lower subdivision level. And now with subdivision level 1 currently selected, which is 3 million, I'm going to go to normal map and we'll create a normal map. I'm going to flip my green channel since the UVs are upside down, right? So 2 wrongs make a right. Same thing we did earlier on in the semester. I'll clone this. Under texture, I'll flip it upside down, which is going to correct that broken green channel. And I'll export this to the desktop, arm norm, which is my normal map. Displacement map will do the same thing. I'm going to smooth the UVs here. I don't need to flip the V here because it's black and white. So I'll just create a displacement map now. Okay, we'll clone that. This one's going to appear in the alpha channel because it's a black and white image. We'll flip it and export it. And this is arm disp for displacement. Texture map. You can see that it's already generated a texture map for me, which is good. I'll just clone that. We'll go to our texture. We'll flip it and export it. And arm base for base color. I don't need the vertex information, so I'll say no. And now I just need to export the mesh over the other arm. Now this is a 3 million poly mesh, so it's going to take ZBrush a moment to process this and export it. And what's worse, it's going to take Max a moment to import it. All right, so almost there. Done. Oh, nope, still running the OBJ. It just occurred to me that while recording this, I could have also live streamed it to Twitch. Okay, so now I've got the mesh and I've got my textures. Before I do anything in ZBrush here, we're going to double check that everything has done the way we expected it to. First, I'm going to delete the mesh called box 1, which is the high poly. Okay, here's still my low poly with everything copacetic. We'll go and import arm. Now this is the high poly one, so this is going to take a moment. You can see we're at 6 million triangles here. 2 million, 3 million verts, and faces 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 million. Okay, so this is kind of an insane amount of polygons to bring into Max. And really, if you do this, you want to make sure that you're only doing this one mesh at a time. Don't bring multiple multi-million meshes into Max. You'll destroy it. Okay, so I'm going to rename it arm high. And I'm going to isolate it and turn off the wireframe. So it's pulled in its diffuse map on its own, which is good. You can see we are getting, even just on the 3 million poly mesh, a fair amount of detail here. I'm going to go to my materials, and we're going to go and tweak this material here. So it generated its own material as it was imported. And all it did was just put a normal or a base color map here, or a diffuse map on this. So I'm going to go add a bump map, which is of the normal bump variety, using my normal that I exported, which was called arm norm, like so. And just like that, as soon as this catches up, now this has got the normal map on it. So this should be all of the high frequency detail from the ZBrush sculpt. So I can see she's got fingerprints and all the little creases and whatnot in her skin still exists. So this is all the information I'm looking to capture. Now I'm not using the displacement just yet. We're going to go back and revisit that. I'm going to isolate so I can see my low poly again. Now, with this particular mesh, the left arm and the right arm are going to be symmetrical, meaning they're going to share texture. So what I need to do here is select the low poly, okay? And then I'll close this for a moment. I'm going to hit 0 to enter the render to texture dialog. Now in the render to texture dialog, we're going to start setting things up so that they work correctly. So the first thing, this is the object that I currently have selected that I want to bake. Now I should probably name this arm low. And you can see that that will now update when I go and click in here. So now it's the arm low. It's just because I have an arm low and an arm high, and I want to make sure that I'm baking in the right direction, because you can bake a normal map from a lower poly object onto a higher poly object. It doesn't know the difference. It's just capturing normals and placing them in an image. And so we want to make sure we're heading in the right direction here. So arm low is the current mesh. We want to make sure that we're actually enabling this and that we are not doing any padding. Now, padding is the name given to the number of pixels outside the UVs that the render is going to do, right? This is to get rid of UV seams on a mesh or on a texture. So I'm going to set this to 0 because I've got a much better process that I use for removing UV seams. So I'm going to make sure that I have no UV seams or no padding in here, and then we'll go and do this in another place. Next, we want a projection map. So right now we're just rendering. We're not actually capturing any information from anywhere. So in the next section, projection mapping, we're going to enable projection mapping, and then we're going to go pick the object that we want to project our normals from. So here's the arm high. I'm going to select that, and I'm going to hit add. And Max is going to generate a UV cage based off these two meshes. Now the cage is going to be purple in color, and it's going to look exactly like the topology from the low poly object. It's taking a while because there are 6 million triangles in the high poly object. Now, here's the best Max could do with its cage, which you can see is very ugly. So before I do anything, I'm going to go into you can see it's placed a modifier on our low poly called projection. And down in here, we've got a cage option. And I'm going to go to the cage option and I'm going to reset it. This is going to push all of the vertices of the cage back to where the vertices that match them on the mesh are. And then all I'm going to use is the push amount, and I'm just going to grow this up a little bit. So the idea here is that we need our high poly and our low poly to be completely contained within this cage. So anywhere where the high poly escapes this cage, we're going to get artifacting. Now, there is going to be artifacting out here. And the reason for this is that there actually is a little tiny gap out here. So that's going to end up causing a problem. This is also why I leave a little bit of overlap with my meshes. So the sleeve that this character wears actually covers the first polygon or two in this mesh. All right, now that the projection is set up correctly, we're going to scroll down to the next area, and this is mapping coordinates. Now, by default, often Max is going to try and do an automatic UV map on your mesh. This means it's going to ignore the UV coordinates you have on your low poly, and since we worked really hard on unwrapping this and getting it to a place that it looks good, don't use the automatic unwrap. Also, place your channel on channel 1. This is the default unwrap channel that you've used already in unwrapping your mesh. Unless you've gone and done an alternate UV channel on something, just leave this at 1. The next section is going to allow us to identify which maps or which textures we want to bake. So I'm going to hit the add button, and let's add first a diffuse map. This is going to be our base color map. I'm going to bake this out at 2K. And then I'm going to go change where this is going to be produced. So I'm going to hit the double dot, and I'll just throw it on my desktop. This is going to give it an automatic name of arm low, the name of my mesh, and then the name of the map, diffuse map. It's also going to save it as a target. All of those things I'm okay with. I'm going to say save. I'm going to make sure compression is turned off, and I'm going to make sure I'm 32-bit. I want an alpha channel. And I'll say okay. Let's add another one. The other one we want is the normals map. So I'm going to add this. It too is going to be 2K. It too is going to go on the desktop. And it's arm low normals map. Also a targa. Also not compressed and 32-bit. And I'll say OK. Once that's done, we're ready to bake. And all we got to do is hit the render dialog button, or the render button on the render dialog right here. So when I do this, it's going to say, we don't really know what you plan on doing with these images. Max's default when you do baking is it wants to compile a material for you and place it on your low poly object. Well, the end result of where we're doing this, where we're placing these meshes, isn't going to be in Max. And so I don't really care if it makes a material in Max. So I'm going to say, don't show me this again, and continue. Then we'll get our render dialog that opens. And after a moment, we'll see that line start passing through. This is the default scan line. And just like that, it's gone and produced an image. Now, if you look very carefully, right here, see that? Red pixel? That pixel's a bad pixel. But if you look at the alpha channel, that red pixel is actually missing from the alpha channel, which is good. We're going to have a way of correcting this. It's not ideal, and you can see they're actually all over the mesh. This happens when you use Max's default baking settings, and you can actually go into the settings and reconfigure things, but for individual pixels like that, I'm not concerned. The trick I'm going to use is going to remove them. The other thing that you want to take note of is, see the ugly dark that you're seeing in here? What you're looking at is not the images we rendered. This is rendered using the lighting that's currently in the world. It's okay, I don't need that. I'm not saving this image out. I don't want to use the save icon. This image is insignificant. I can just close it. Now, before I do anything, we need to double check that those images worked. So I'm going to go into Photoshop, and I'm going to close some other software. And I'm going to open up those images just to ensure that they actually rendered the way that I want them to. So this is arm low diffuse map and arm low normals map. Let's open them up. And you can see now our diffuse map actually did render exactly what we expected it to. There's no lighting information in there. And the normals map too looks pretty complete. In fact, if I go and look at a fingertip, you can see we're starting to get some of the fingerprints here. Now they're a little garbled. This is because of how low res the low is, but there's that thumbnail, or the missing thumbnail, as it were. So yeah, it looks like it's actually doing a pretty decent job. So I'll leave these images open here, and we'll go back into Max. Now, we excluded one of the 3 images that we rendered from ZBrush, the displacement map. So let's render that now. Now, we can't render a displacement map in the same way that we rendered these ones. Or we can, but we're going to do it in a different way. We're actually going to do it in the same way. It's a little confusing. I'll try to explain this a little bit better. So first, I don't want to put this in the displacement category. And the reason for that is when we add, there actually is no displacement option. So I'm going to add it as a different image. In this case, I'm going to keep my normal map turned on. I'm going to go to my diffuse map, and I'll just swap the diffuse map for the displacement map. This is going to give us a black and white high poly that's using the displacement map as a color map. Now, this is not what we're going to use it for, but it's going to allow us to bake it out. So what I'm going to do now, move that back over, is I'm going to go back into my baker here, and I'm going to grab the normals map. We don't need to bake the normals map again, so I'll delete it. I'm going to bake another diffuse map, and I very importantly need to go and rename this, not diffuse map, but displacement map. Now, this is just going to render a black and white copy of that image that looks like the displacement map. So when I hit render, we'll see it chug for a second. The little line will come down to about here, and then we'll get a grayscale version of this. So there it goes, and then grayscale. Now, hopefully, these little red dots have appeared in the same area, which shouldn't actually matter even if they did and if they didn't. So I'm going to, again, go into Photoshop, and let's go and open up that image just to ensure that we are getting exactly what we wanted. And it appears that we are. Okay, now that I know my images have baked out correctly, I'm free to give Max a little bit of a performance boost. So I'm going to remove the dialog and delete the projection modifier. I'm also going to delete the high poly. And I can now start to work on a new material for my low poly, just to make sure that this is going to work and look exactly the way that we want it to. Okay, step number 1, put this material on the mesh. And let's go add a diffuse color. which I'll use a bitmap, and we'll just grab this from the desktop here as the arm low. Up we go, and it looks like the arm low is working correctly. Let's add our bump at 100%, which is using a normal bump, using an image that looks like this. And let's go and place this up. So far, so good. We're actually seeing what looks to be a pretty good proxy of the high poly. Now, if you look close here, we can actually see those red pixels causing issues. And they're kind of littered all over the place. You can also see in some instances here, see if I can get this to happen, my UV seam. See it kind of fluctuating there in black? Now, the reason you're seeing a black UV seam has to do with our textures, which, as it turns out, the background of this image is black. That's why we're seeing black there. Now, this is one of the largest mistakes I see in newbies working on textures, and it's a really, really, really easy thing to correct. I'm going to show you. I'm just going to do a Google here, Google search, and we're going to look at some images, and see if I can find. So here, I'll bring this over into this window so you can see it. So I just did a search for ARM texture map just to kind of see if we can find some images online here that people have done and kind of figure out whether or not they've been done correctly or whatnot. So when I look at things like this, actually, let's do this with large images just so we can kind of see here a little bit better. So this one is not bad, right? See the background image in this is actually using a color that's really similar to the color of the arms. We're going to have a harder time actually seeing seams when you see this. When you see something that looks a little different, a little bit like, let me see if I can find one. I'm not even seeing any more images of textures. Okay, so let's go back to any size, because I did see a couple here. So this is not good UV padding. See how you can actually see the UVs? You can actually see where the outline of the hands are and where the torso is. Well, you're going to get UV seams when you do this. And even if you blur this stuff out here, once you do MIP mapping in your game engine, you're actually going to see those seams as they appear. This one's not bad, but again, I can still see kind of very clearly where the outline of the UVs is. And some of these things actually get pretty horrendous. When you start getting like this isn't even close to the same color. You're going to get UV seams like crazy on something like that. Black is another one that's just killer. That's not a texture. But black's another one where you're just going to get it's going to be absolutely brutal. There, this. Black on the background like this, brutal. You're going to see black seams wherever you go. Now, there are plenty of different tools and tricks that you can do to do padding, and the best that I've seen so far, that's exactly that same thing. So the best that I've found so far is from a programmer named, in fact, I don't know what his name is or whether or not it's even a he. His website's called Flaming Pear, and he creates Photoshop plugins. And if you go to his free trials and scroll on all the way down to the bottom, you'll find these guys, free plugins. In here is the best padding I've ever found for texturing. This is it right here. It's called, I just saw it. Oh, maybe it's not here. Anyway, it's in this list. So what you want to do is you want to download this for Windows if you're using Windows, and then put it in your plugins folder in Photoshop. And what's going to happen is in Photoshop, when you go to your filters, you'll now have Flaming Pear. And all of his filters now appear, which are absolutely free and is fantastic to use. Let me show you the way these work. First, here's my my diffuse map, right, for my arm. That black background, including the missing pixels, which I think rendered red. I don't actually see any here. There's one. Okay, missing pixels, which are red. So here's what I'm going to do. First, I'm going to add a layer mask to this layer. And then in my channels, I'm going to go, and here's the alpha channel that baked, and I'm just going to copy that and paste it into the layer mask. I'll go back up and apply the layer mask. And now, let's turn off the alpha. Now, all the black pixels are gone. And in fact, if we go look at where those holes were, the little red pixels, we actually get a hole, which that too is going to work out really nicely. I'm going to do the same thing here to this one. I'm going to apply a layer mask. I'm going to go to the layer mask. Now, I don't need to copy and paste. Since I already have it on the clipboard, I'll just paste it in and apply it. And we'll do the same thing with the normal map. This one, go to the channels, into the mask, and apply it like so. Okay. Now, I can go begin doing my padding. So the padding goes a little bit something like this. You go to Filter, you go to the Flaming Pear ones that you've just downloaded and installed, and you go down to these three here, Solidify, A, B, and C. Now, they are all different algorithms that essentially do the same thing. And so try one. If you don't get the results you're looking for, try one of the other ones. They all have kind of a different approach of doing it, and the results are all fairly similar. I'm going to use B, and I did this in the normal map, and we can go take a look now, and you'll see that it actually got us fairly close to no seam on this thing. I'm going to do the same thing here. Now I can hit Control F to replay the last filter, and that'll go and do that one. And I'll do the same thing here, Control F, which will replay the last filter here. And now it's gone and bled out a beautiful mapping on this.
I think that plugin will work with
anything.
Program?
With what?
Photoshop?
No, it's a Photoshop plugin. Why? What are you using?
Creta.
What's that?
Creta.
Oh. What is that?
It's pre-painted.
Oh, is it? I don't know it. Okay. Okay. So now that I've done these here, I'm going to save these. And I'll just save them over the original one. So this is the diffuse map, which I'll go and alter this down to a target here and save it over the diffuse. Yes. I'm going to change this down to 24 bits since I'm done with that alpha channel. I'll save this one, again, as a targa over this one. And again, I don't need the alpha channel anymore. And the normal map, I'll save as a targa, overwriting the original without that alpha map. Okay, so now if we go into max, remember that black seam? If I grab and move the camera a little bit, oh, why do I still see it? Oh, you know why? No, I don't know why. Look, why is that still there? Okay, let me make sure that this is actually using the right images here. Oh, I know what's going on. This is actually using, no, I thought I might have been using the, there we go. Looks like it was just shadowing. Okay, so it appears to be gone now. Okay, let's try and get a little extra detail out of this. Now, my paint job, and I purposely do this, my paint job for my diffuse map is pretty simple. It's got some darker tones on the dorsal side of the hand, the top of the hand, as well as the top of the arm. You can see there's a little bit of vein structure in here. The underside of the arm, I make a little pinker in color, a little peachier. And then the palm of the hand, a little bit more red. And you can see there's splotches of different colors and whatnot. But this is not actually giving me what I would consider to be a good texture. It's pretty simple. So here's a really cool trick that I use that allows me to get a lot more detail out of this. And this is why we baked our displacement map out. I'm going to copy the displacement map and close it. And I'm going to paste the displacement map directly on top of the base color map. I'm going to go set this blend mode to be overlay. And we'll go zoom in like the thumbnail here area so we can see what this is doing. So there's without and there's with. So it's grabbing a little extra color, a little extra variety in tone, and applying that now down to the fingers. So if we go and zoom in down here on a fingertip, you can see a little bit more of that fingerprint being applied. You can see too what it does to the wrinkles here. The raised edges, we start getting a little bit more of a little whiter trim on them. And we can actually see the crease is now a little bit darker. And I'm just noticing that I'm still seeing those red pixels. Apparently they did not. I'm going to go and try and select them here. Apparently they did not go and bake out. Oops, that's the wrong layer. I was hoping to be able to grab that. Oh, that's average. 2-point sample. It's not going to work either. So I'm going to try select, and I'll use color range here. And I'm going to try and pick on that pixel. And say OK. And hopefully that will have grabbed all of the red pixels. It did, which I'll delete. And I'll delete them on here too. So I'm just going to reproduce my filter and my filter. And that should now have gotten rid of them. Okay, so there's my displacement map. I'm going to go rename this to displacement. Like so. And I'm going to grab the normal map. Now, here's a really cool trick that not a lot of people do. Your normal map is actually just comprised of 3 separate images, right? Your red, green, and blue channel. Red containing white from the right and black from the left. So if I find a crease here somewhere, let's make this a little bit larger, something that we can identify. So here are the creases in the thumb. So if you look at this, white is hitting surfaces from the right and black is hitting surfaces from the left. This is not lighting. This is directionality of the surfaces in the x direction, meaning the straight horizontal direction. So anything that points to the right, where that angle change happens, it's catching more of that white value. And anything that points to the left, it's getting that darker value. Okay, so I'm going to copy that layer, and I'm going to, or that channel, and I'm going to paste it as a layer. And I'm just going to rename this X, like that. I'm going to do the same thing for the green channel. Now the green channel is vertical information. White pointing down and black pointing up. This again is just directionality. It is not lighting. I'm going to copy that channel. I'm going to paste this as a layer in here, name it Y. Now, we're not going to use the blue channel, but I'll show you what the blue channel is. The blue channel is lighting on Z, which is essentially your camera axis, meaning looking straight at the object. So any face that's pointing directly towards us is white, and anything that starts pointing away from us or perpendicular to the camera is now going to be black or dark. So this gives you, again, directionality. And these 3 images, X, Y, and Z, are where these colors come from in your normal map. Okay, I'm going to remove the alpha channel from this, and I haven't actually changed anything on this, so I can just close it. Okay, so now we've got information from X and Y on this image. Let's start with X. Now, currently, the X information is white from the right and black from the left, and I want to get rid of that. I just want to have horizontal height information. The trick for doing that is to go to Filter. I'm going to go to Stylize, and I'm going to emboss this image. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the angle to match the white of the X axis. So instead of white from the right, black from the left, we now get black down, white up. And it's only capturing the horizontal relevant information. Let's do the same thing to Y. Filter, Stylize, and Emboss. And now the white was coming from below, so I'll make my axis match below. This is now grabbing height information as it pertains to the vertical axis. I'm now going to set the Y to be an overlay so that we get both the horizontal and the vertical together in a single image. And I'll merge this down. I'll now set this to be a displacement. Sorry, that's not displacement, that's normal. Or realm. Fingers going faster in my brain. Normal, there we go. And now I'm going to set this to be an overlay. See, whoops, overlay. See what this does to the detail again? Look at the pores in this area. Look at the slight details in the skin. Now, it's actually quite a bit of overkill here in the palm. This is actually going to look really bad if we save it like this. So here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the normal map on as well. So we've got, or the displacement map on as well. So we actually get both of these things. Look at the creases and the knuckles. It's beautiful. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn their opacity down to about 50% or so. And now we're still getting some of that information, but it's not nearly as bright or as dark. So if I look in this area of the thumb, I can still see those little tiny creases, right? Look at without. Just red, just pink. And with, we've now got a lot of extra information here. Now this too might be overkill and I might need to turn it down a little bit more. However, I'm going to save it and take a look at it before I do anything. So here, this is my new diffuse map. So if I go into max and we take a look at this thing now, we can see what it's doing. Now, it's still looking, like I said, it's a little overkill for the current level of detail. It's doing a pretty decent job back here. However, remember that Max is not currently using an HDR lighting setup. It's not using image-based lighting. We're not using metalness roughness here. And so in order to actually see what this is going to look like, we're going to go and export this arm over the arm on the desktop, like so. And I'm going to open up Marmoset, and we'll take a look at Marmoset. So if I go back to my desktop, now the reason I'm using Marmoset is in order to get a metalness roughness preview of what this material is going to look like. Also, there are currently 3 images that I'm missing in order to get this mesh to have all of its textures. Those 3 images that are missing are ambient occlusion, metalness, and roughness. None of those were things that I had in ZBrush, nor do I have them in 3ds Max. So first, I'm just going to put a material on the arm here, this default material. And before I do anything, I'm going to change it to be a metalness material. And I'm going to leave the metalness all the way up because I know what my metalness map is going to look like. And I can go play with these values here. Actually, let's turn the metalness down for a minute. We'll come back to that. So let's go and load up the images that we have. So our normal, which is the arm's low normal. I'm going to make sure the map is set to 3ds Max, which is where we baked our normals, so that the tangent space is correct. I'm going to go to the albedo and I'll load up our arm's diffuse map. And now we can see in a PBR environment what this is going to look like. So I can see that that is still a little bit of overkill in there. I'm going to go to the render here and I'm going to turn on local reflections and ambient occlusion. And I'm going to look at this in a couple of different environments here. So I'm going to go to the sky presets and I'll just bounce around between a couple of these things, just to ensure that I'm actually seeing it in a variety of lighting. And so I'll go back to this one here. This has got a pretty nice looking lighting setup. And I can see that like we're a little dark inside some of these creases. So that trick that I'm using with our displacement and our normal map here might be a little bit strong. So I'm going to turn this down to 33 and 33-ish. And again, I'm going to resave this as a targa and overwrite my diffuse map like so. Go back into Marmoset, and you can see that's now subtle in what it's doing, and it's starting to look a little bit more like a realistic hand. You can see also the detail from these fingerprints, like it's gone. It's so blobby and small in here, but you know, we're dealing with a 2K texture, and on a mesh that's, you know, going to be however big in game, you know, even a first-person shooter hand, you know, you can't see those fingerprint details, so it's a little bit of overkill. Okay, let's build some of the maps that we're missing here. So obviously the gloss is not where we want it to be. So here's kind of how I start building my gloss map, or I'm going to invert this because it's actually the reflection map that I'm building. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the slider here to get the skin to reflect the way that I want the skin to reflect. So I'm kind of looking at this from different angles. I'm going to use shift and rotate the camera a little bit so I can see the reflectivity. And I essentially want to get this to look and behave a little bit more like skin. So it's not bad up here. If you look at the reflections in here, that's starting to look a little bit more like skin. Cool. Here's this number, 0.43. That is the level of black and white that's currently applied to the roughness map. So if I go into Photoshop, I'm going to create a new layer. And on that new layer, I'm going to go put 43. Oops. Let's go pick that color again. I'm going to kill the saturation. And I've got 43 in the black level here. And I'm going to fill this like this. This is now, if I hide these guys, an image. So we're not going to call this diffuse map, but we're going to call this roughness. Okay. I'll go back into here, and now I'm going to load that image in roughness. Now it's got an alpha on it, which means I've got to go resave that again as a targa. And again, I want 24 bits. I want to make sure I'm using targets here. So there we go, roughness map. So now, if I turn the, you can see the gloss slider now goes to 1. This is being multiplied by the value that's in here. Now, one of the other things that I can do is all those little recessed pits and things in the skin, I can actually make them less shiny. So since this is a roughness map, 0 is not rough, and 1 is rough. So the darker colors get, the shinier your mesh gets. And the closer to 1, the closer to white your colors get, the duller they get, the rougher they get. So what I can do now, I've got these two images, and currently what they're doing is they're making any of the pits go darker. This means that they're getting closer to shiny. So if I go and invert this and invert this, we now have the opposite. We now have the creases getting white. So I'm going to save this targa over my roughness map. And now I've got the same information which is allowing the creases in the skin to remain a little bit rougher than the surface detail. So again, it's subtle, but it's allowing a little bit more variation in that reflectivity of the skin. Let's go look at this under another environment here. Okay, so just enough that it's actually picking up a little bit more variations in tone here. And it's really starting to read his skin in through here. Okay. So far, so good. We need a metalness map. Well, the metalness map is actually fairly simple to make. Is any part of this arm metal? No. So a metalness map is going to be just black. Now, I'm going to open up the roughness map that I just made, the targa version of this. And currently, in the targa, the red, green, and blue channels are all identical. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to copy this image, and I'm going to paste it into the green channel. Now, normally the way that I do things with my red, green, and blue is I use the acronym ARM, A-R-M. That stands for AO, ambient occlusion for A, roughness for green, and metal for blue. Well, I know none of the arm is metal, so I can fill this with black. So now I've got roughness, metalness. Lastly, I need the ambient occlusion. To make my ambient occlusion, I can go back to max, and I can unhide whatever else I would have in this scene. So if I unhide all, I don't know what else is in here, nothing. But anything else that I would have that would interact with this, if there was a sleeve on this or a ring or something else on this, I would unhide that to give me my ambient occlusion. I'm just going to leave the ambient occlusion as white for now, only because where I generally make my ambient occlusion is in substance, and we'll show you that workflow in a moment. So in my red channel here, I'm just going to set my ambient occlusion to be white. Now this funky colored image now, I'm going to save this as a targa, and instead of having roughness map written here, I'm going to call it ARM for ambient occlusion, roughness, metal. Now the reason I use that acronym is it becomes really, really easy to remember where these things go. So in the occlusion channel here, I'm going to add an occlusion, and I'll add that image, orange. Now A is the R. Roughness, we'll use that same image, is the green, and metal this one is the blue. Now, for whatever reason, that seems to have really glazed up her arm. So I just want to double check that those images that I was looking at here, there's something funny going on with this image in that that gray value seems to jump around a little bit. So there's the AO, the roughness, which I just want to make sure this is. So you can see there's actually a color separation here in these two things. See that difference? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this one and paste it over this. And I'll just resave this image again. Like so. And you can see that that's gone and tweaked it a little bit more. I think she's still a little shiny. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and adjust that again. This is my roughness here, so I'm just going to use levels. And I'm going to brighten up this image a little bit, bringing it closer to roughness. And I'll go back in here again. I want to make sure my invert is on. And there, now we're getting that value back again. Okay. That is essentially the process going through Max for baking. Now, let me show you the process through going through Substance to bake. No, because I'm recording. So what I'm going to do now is just export the low of this. I've already exported the low, and it actually just occurred to me that I exported over the high. So I'm going to re-export this one as arm high so that I have this. So we'll let that do its thing. And I'll leave Marmoset open because I'm going to bring in these images as well. We'll let that do its thing, and this one has already been exported. So the only thing I have to do now is just open up Substance, and we'll go into Painter. And I'll show you the process of doing this in Painter. All right, Painter. So step number one, I'm going to go File, New, and we'll set up our new project here. I'm just going to be doing the arm again. Okay, so I'm going to select a mesh from my desktop, which is the arm. I'll do this at 2K, so it's the exact same size, and I'll say OK. Okay, now we're going to get our arm in Substance. I can delete this default layer that appears here. It's only got a single material on it. I could have named this in 3ds Max to rename this. The more recent version of Substance lets you rename your materials in Substance, which is really nice. Here we've got our texture properties for this thing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into Bake Textures. Okay, so first things first, the common attributes are going to affect all of the maps we're going to bake. And I want to bake them at 2K. I want to bake them at the same size as my image. Dilation is the padding. I'll bring that up to like 16 or so, just to ensure that we don't get any UV seams in anything. High poly meshes. Now let's ensure that this has finished exporting, which it has. And we'll go in and grab that arm high. Now, it isn't loaded yet. Okay, just putting this in here doesn't put it into the software yet. It only grabs it once we hit the Bake Textures button. If you have a cage, for instance, the one we set up in 3ds Max, you could hit this button and load the cage file in so that you could use it there. This is the maximum front and back distance that the cage will look for a high poly mesh. I don't need to worry about matching or anything here. I've only got a single mesh, and so I don't really need to worry about that. The anti-aliasing I am going to turn up to 8. Now, anti-aliasing of 8 is going to kill the ambient occlusion and thickness bakes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn them off. And I'll bake at 8 anti-aliasing for everything else. And then I'll come back and I'll bake it like 2 for the AO and thickness. And it'll speed them up a little bit. So now I can go to each one of these things. There are no properties for the normal map. There are no properties for the world space normal map. The ID map is going to use vertex color, which there is none on this mesh. I can just use material or submesh ID, and hue shift is okay. I can also do random if I wanted to. This is only, again, a single mesh with only one single material ID, so this is just going to be a flat color. Curvature we'll leave exactly as it is, and position we'll leave as is. So I'll hit Bake Arm Textures, and this little window will pop up, and that's it. It's beginning to bake. I'm sorry? Many things can cause it to fail. The most common that I've seen is the ID map. If you're trying to bake an ID map from something that doesn't exist, you'll get a fail. It can also fail if you've got a chosen the wrong normal map and there isn't actually something there that you've picked or whatnot, or you didn't load a normal map. You'd have to read the error that pops open. Every time you get a fail, the log will pop open. And you got to go through the log and read why it did cause a fail. It won't just say fail. It'll tell you what caused the fail. And then you'll have to kind of debug it from there. So you can see that this is going to take a little bit of time at 2K. We'll let it do its thing. I've got a lot of stuff open at the moment, and so maybe what we'll do is close some of this stuff up to try and free up a little bit more resources for this. What's that?
And there goes.
Yeah. This baker is pretty quick. I don't like that it actually returns no information while it's baking. Like I really do like the progress bar, but it seems to be frozen until it hits like 40, 50%. It doesn't actually give you real-time updates. And so you just got to be patient with it. It will eventually finish like so. So now if you go take a look in the texture settings, we've got a normal map. We've got a world space normal map. We've got an ID map, which as predicted is a solid color. We've got a curvature map and a position map. Next, we still need the AO and the thickness. So I'm going to go bake maps again. And this time, I'm going to turn off the normal, the world space, and the ID. I'll turn on the ambient occlusion. We'll turn off the curvature and position, and we'll turn on the thickness. Okay, now we can go and drop this down to 2 times anti-aliasing, so it doesn't take as long. And I'm going to go and increase the secondary rays here. Let's go to 256 for these. This is just going to ensure that we get a little bit of a cleaner bake. And I may also drop this down to 1024. I'm going to keep it at 2K right now. A lot of times I'll drop it down one level just to try and speed up the bake as well. These 2 maps usually take much longer than the original 5 that I baked. They are far more intensive in how they're created. For instance, the ambient occlusion requires that it does ray trace lighting, and you end up getting these bounced rays from omnidirectional lighting or global illumination in order to figure out where the crevices and shadows are. The normal map just looks at the high poly and works from that. And so this means that these ones are going to take a little bit more time to do this. However, once they're done, they're going to result in a pretty complete set of maps here for this. And then once that's done, I'm just going to import the images that I've already made, my diffuse that I made in ZBrush. And I don't even need the displacement in this case. I can actually do a little bit more work in Substance to defeat that. So we'll let this go. Give it a moment here. I think we're done with ZBrush. I'm going to close this. Yeah. Max file with all of your textures. So I can go through and see what they look like. When I grade your characters, generally what I'll do is either bring them into Unreal or into Marmoset, and I'll build your materials out of the textures you've provided me to see what they look like. As long as you send me your texture files, don't send me PSDs; they'll be too big. Save everything out as a targa. And as long as you've provided for me all the targas and your max file with the mesh in it, that's fine. That's all I need. I can work out the rest. Okay, the AO has finished. We're on to the thickness. I'm hoping the thickness is not quite as long as the AO, so we can keep going here. So, let's close the launcher. We'll keep everything else going here. You want to make sure you don't get click happy too with software. When you start seeing this little blue circle, or even software turning white, if you click, that does not mean the software is crashed. Usually the way things work with Windows is that the software needs to report to Windows that it's still up and running. And when it goes white like that, it means that it stopped responding to Windows. Windows checking to see if the software is still up and running. And a lot of these software packages just don't bother with that. They concentrate all their processing on what they're doing. And they can often return or appear to have crashed. ZBrush is notorious for this, where you'll actually get it turn white, and you'll get the Windows error that says the software appears to have stopped running. It hasn't. It just stopped talking to Windows. It's still doing what you want it to do. Just leave it and be patient. Don't get click happy. You can actually cause it to crash if you get click happy. Okay, I can't imagine that there's much more to go here. Once this is done, we'll have the entire collection of initial textures here to work from. These are essentially what we're going to use to create some types of effects here in Painter. Now, usually with skin and the human body, I don't usually do that much Painter work. I'm more fond of doing it in ZBrush, where I can hand paint everything and doing some Photoshop work and stuff like that. I generally don't do anything or too much work in Painter, if any. I know that's not very common. I know there are a lot of artists that do work in Painter. I've just gotten quite accustomed to the way that I do skin, and I've been pretty pleased with the results thus far. So I haven't really had a need to go beyond that. Come on now. Yeah, you can see up here it says not responding. Again, it's not responding to Windows. Okay, bake is done. We now have an ambient occlusion. We now have curvature, thickness, and everything else. So one of the things that you could do if you go into textures here, that ambient occlusion, I can right click on this and export this resource, which I'll throw in the desktop for now. And I'll select that folder. And check this out. That ARM map that we made, this one, if I now go to open and I grab that AO, there is now the A component of the AO. So there is now my proper AORM map, or my ambient occlusion, roughness, and metalness. And you can see it's got a little bit more in terms of funky colors going on here. So I'll just go save this as a Targa, and I'll save it as the ARM. This can get a little confusing, and I understand why people don't like my ARM acronym. It's just something that I started using early on, and so I kind of stuck with it. You can see how it can get confusing, where this is a texture for an arm that uses the ARM acronym. So you have an ARM. So I can understand why people don't like that. What's that? Yeah, and so... Yep, I'll show you. Okay, so now that I've got these things all built here, I'm going to go and import another texture into this group here. So if I go to my desktop and I go look for the ARM low images that we made, there's our diffuse map that we used already. I'm just going to drag this in. I'm going to tell this that this is a texture map, and that I only want this imported for the current session. Otherwise, it's going to become part of the interface here, and I don't want that. Cool, so there's this guy here. And now I'm going to go and add a fill layer. And in that fill layer, I'll grab my color map and put it into the base color information. I'm going to go and turn off the metal, rough, normal, and height. And you can see it's not looking so good, but that's because the default scaling here for UVs is set 3 times. So if I go and set this to 1, we'll get a 1-to-1 scaling of those UVs. Another thing that I can do would be to bring in that ARM map and actually start applying it to the roughness, metalness, and ambient occlusion here. The AO is already in here, so there's not much point in doing that. And so what I can do is I can actually just go in here. I turn the roughness back on. I now have a slider for just how rough or glossy I can choose to make that skin. So again, I want to constantly move the light around here as I'm doing this, making sure that I see how it's reflecting off the surface. So, you know, you get someone covered with a glaze and you get somebody made out of Play-Doh. You know, the idea here is to get something kind of in between that's going to read as being skin, something like that. The metal I can leave as being off because none of this is metal. And then that would work there, you know, and again, depending on what else you want to do to this thing, being that it's just human skin, you know, there's not really a lot of need to go and do much else to it. But I can do things like, let's go and here, let's add some craziness to this. I'm going to rust up the arm. So I'm going to add a rust layer. And if I go into my smart masks here, let's use an ambient occlusion on the rust. And we can get rust kind of gathering in the crevices. You know, kind of silly, not worth, you know, really doing because there's not a lot of reason a human hand would rust. But yeah, we can do it with dirt. But even like, you know, we're talking well beyond what a farmer would have at this level. It's probably not really worth doing. This is why I really don't do much in terms of painter. Yeah, you can do that kind of stuff in here too. But again, most of what I do in terms of that kind of stuff is actually done in ZBrush, right? I paint it to look the way that I want it to look in ZBrush. Okay, so let's talk about exporting these now and getting these images to go into Unreal. So the idea here, I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to say Export Textures. And now we get this little dialog that opens. And the first thing I want to do is I want to go to the configuration. I want to go down to where it says Unreal Engine 4 Packed. And what this is going to do is it's going to show you the default Unreal 4 setup that comes with the software. The first image up here is going to be named the name of the mesh, the name of the texture set, and then the words base color. Okay, so in this case, the name of the mesh is going to be ARM, the name of the texture set is ARM, and then it's going to be called base color. Well, on a mesh like this, I don't need that $ texture set because there's no texture set on this. And so I could go and remove this. Now I get an error every time this thing updates. So we'll just say, okay. I got to close this and reopen it. There we go. So I go to export textures again and go back into here. So Unreal 4. So now that's gone and updated here. There appears to be an error every time you update one of these things, but you get the idea. You can go and tweak those. Now the color and the little boxes here on the right indicate how these images are going to be clumped together when you export them. So in regards to the base color, we're going to get this purple and this blue, and the purple relates to the base color. So that base color is going to be exported as an RGB, and the A, which is this blue one, is the opacity. Currently there's no opacity on this, and so I'll end up with an empty alpha channel on that image. The next one is the occlusion rough metal. That is in line with my ARM, right? That's ARM, AO, rough metal. And this is using the orange, light purple, and indigo, and that's orange, the mixed AO, the light purple, which is the rough, and the metalness, which is the indigo. So that's already set up that way. The normal map is just using the normal map from DirectX, and then there's also an emissive map here that gets exported, which doesn't exist on this mesh either. Now, one of the things that I do is I go and edit this configuration and rename it. And I've got my own configuration up here now that's exclamation, exclamation, Unreal 4. The reason I use those exclamations is that it puts it first alphabetically, meaning it's a lot easier to select it. I don't have to scroll down and go find Unreal. And here I've got mesh, texture set, color, mesh, texture set, AO, and let's change this rough to be R, and let's change the metal to be M. And I'll get rid of the O. I like using as small a word as possible here. So there's that guy again, just because of this bug here. I'm going to go and close that and export the textures again and go back to my configuration. And now I got mesh, texture set color, mesh, texture set ARM, mesh, texture set normal. I've removed my emissive, which I don't use at all. And the alpha here, there is an alpha channel, but you can see it's just defaulting to white. And so that's fine there. I could actually switch this out to an RGB if I wanted to without the A, and it would export this. But I'm often putting something in my alpha channel in Photoshop or elsewhere. Now, if I go to the export settings, I just go pick and choose where I want this to go. So let's go to the desktop. I'm going to make a new folder here, and I'll just call it Substance. And we'll select this folder as the output. The configuration, I'll go and choose my Unreal 4. You can see why that exclamation is really useful now. I'm going to switch this to Targas. I don't particularly need the 8-bit PNGs. Dilation is set to infinite, so it's going to pad all of your textures until it runs out of space. And it's going to export this material set, which is my arm, containing these 3 textures, and it's going to export at 2048. When that's done, you just hit export, and voila, export successful. So now if I go into that desktop folder, which we called Substance, there are the 3 images. So if you look at this, let's take a look at this arm that baked out. And if I go and open the arm that I was working on, you can see that there is a little bit of difference here in the orange colors. And in fact, my arm's actually got other values going in here. Let's look at these one at a time. So the AO should be identical since I did export the AO from Substance to put in here. The green channel, which is the roughness, you can see that the arm I worked on is a little bit rougher than the arm from Substance. Again, I just kind of eyeballed how shiny the arm was, so there's not much difference there. And then the metalness map is actually black in both of them, so they're kind of identical. Let's go take a look at this in Marmo and see what the quality looks like here. So again, I'll import my low poly arm, and we'll go and create a material for this guy. So I'll grab the material, I'll switch it to be a metalness. I'll grab the arm texture here. So ARM. I'll go to the occlusion, and we'll add an occlusion map, which is going to be the same image, which is the A, and then the gloss, which is going to get the arm, which is going to get the AR, and this is inverted because, again, this is a gloss map. Again, you can see that Marmo's got an issue with rendering roughness correctly. That's because it uses gloss and not rough, and so things get a little kind of wonky in here. So I'll do that. You can see that the AO map is causing there to be some pretty dark areas in between the fingers. No, the end of the world. I'll go and grab my normal, and I'll grab my albedo, and I'm going to turn down that gloss. Apparently, I can only make it glossier. So yeah, Marmoset didn't do a great job of rendering that glossiness. And so we probably want to take this into Unreal, which is going to be the end result anyway. A lot of times I just use Marmoset to set up my textures and make sure that they're looking the way that I want them to. So before I do any editing of this roughness, let's go and bring it into Unreal here. So I'm going to go to Meshes, and I'll just go and import that arm desktop. And where were you? Arm, OBJ. It's going to come in sideways on here, but that's all right. I don't really care much about that. And I'll go and import those Substance textures, like so. I want to make sure that normal map is converted to a normal. I'm going to go into my ARM, and I'm going to turn off the sRGB since I'm using each of the layers independently of one another. And then I'll just go and create a new material, which I'll call arm. Oh yeah, arm matte. There we go. So if I go into this material here, I grab the normal map. It already put it in the right area here. I'll bring my diffuse in and plug it in, and I'll bring in the roughness. And now I'll go and set these guys up. So again, A, which is ambient occlusion, R, which is rough, and M, which is metal. And you can see we're now actually getting proper reflectivity in this here. So I'll just go save this out as is. And if we go look at this arm now, and I go and put this material on it, we can go take a look and see how it's actually rendering in Engine, which is far more important than what it looks like in Marmoset. So you can see we are still a little bit on the glossy side here. That arm could probably use a little bit of toning down. My assumption is that the arm that I did in Photoshop is actually going to be a little bit better than this one. Look, this is an arm, because it's the mesh named arm and a texture set called arm, and it's actually in the ARM texture map, and it's actually in a material called arm. And so, yeah, naming is really important. I'm going to go bring in that other arm that I did, and in the material here, I'm going to go and swap it out. So I'm going to go and use, let's also turn the sRGB off on this thing. And I'm going to go use that one instead. And I believe this will actually give us a better result. Not bad. I think it's killed too much of it. So somewhere kind of in between is going to be good. But again, this is kind of the importance here. I can see a little bit of shine down here. I'm going to try and move the light around. Whoops. Thought I was holding L. Yeah, so there's a little bit of reflectivity in the skin. I don't think it's quite anywhere near what skin should be. But you get the idea. That's kind of the process involved in doing this stuff. And so, yeah, that's kind of the workflow for both of those things. Going through and doing both the Marmoset and the Max workflow. Cool? All right.